White privilege seems to be a topic that the Democrats like to talk about more than anybody else. And Dinesh D'Souza got into a heated argument about white privilege again, and then asked the questioner a very intimidating question in this classic video. Hello and welcome back to Resist the Mainstream. I'm Steve Inman reporting the news that the mainstream won't. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and of course hit that notification bell to stay up to date with our latest classic videos and reports. A student approached the microphone to ask Speaker Dinesh D'Souza stepped up to the plate in regards to the all too common topic in today's educational arena, white privilege. Okay, so the young man was hesitant but calm in giving examples of historic systemic racism and wealth privilege going as far back as World War II. His question alluded to policies such as affirmative action and leaned into a conversation about the reality of reparations.
After World War II, the white middle class soared to prosperity as a result of bills like the GI Bill. And African Americans who were coming home from war didn't get those benefits simply because they were African American. The U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs denied African Americans access to those benefits simply because of their race. And you are correct in saying that no one today dealt with that particular issue. With that being said, however, there was wealth amassed as a result of those programs that still exists today. And when I think of your example about an individual who works as a janitor and sees people dining in a beautiful cafe walking home from work, I want to ask you, do you think any of that indignation, given certain circumstances, might actually be justified simply because there have been systematic blocks in people's way throughout American history? Not ending with slavery, not ending with the Jim Crow laws, not ending, some would say even today, we still have housing discrimination, all of which is to say, you found that during the Cold War era, there was a massive boom in the white middle class's prosperity, and you just didn't have that among African Americans, not because they weren't meritorious, but because they were discriminated against.
Are you actually saying that you believe in a rule of social justice today that says globally, let's look at this as a global rule of justice. I'm going to figure out whose ancestors did what to whom, and I'm going to return goods that were illicitly taken from the beginning to the people who had it originally. Do you believe that that's a viable way to organize our society? Do you believe, if I can ask you a direct question, that you are the beneficiary of white privilege here at Amherst?
D'Souza replied with an argument for why reparations for past generations' suffering is pointless and morally outrageous. We've heard the debate before, and it always comes down to who owes other people what. And the answer often gets lost in the fact that, historically speaking, nearly every race or ethnic group on Earth would be entitled to reparation from another group due to some historic atrocity. It's a futile argument that usually goes nowhere, but in the instance, D'Souza asked the student about his own privilege directly.
I
yes
do.
or no?
Well, yeah, and
Pause.
Okay.
If you are, can I ask you a further question?
Oh, okay, yeah, but I don't just say it in a I don't say it in a self-flagellating and self-aggrandizing way.
Hold on. Okay, go on.
You know, I really try not to. I'm simply saying that because you asked me. Really, I view the recognition of one's privilege as an impetus to change things. So I don't just say I have white privilege. I try to help those who have not benefited from such privilege.
How? Hold on. Let's pursue this for a moment.
Sure.
You say, this is actually very important because there's a psychology here, right?
Well, you see, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm really not trying to attack you. I'm not trying to be provocative. I just find that often, I think the essence of much of this discourse surrounds hypocrisy. And you're trying to demonstrate that I'm a hypocrite. I say I benefit from white privilege, yet I don't actually do anything. But I'm gonna backpedal and say that ultimately I think what the greatest vice is cruelty, and I don't want to be hypocritical. So to answer your question, I'll start in high school. I mean, do people want to hear this, or do we?
Educated.
Yeah, I find it funny. Anytime you tell somebody to put their money where their mouth is, why don't you give up your job? Why don't you give up your CEO position for a person of color or a minority? Why can't you?
One of the benefits of a good education of reading people like Nietzsche is you begin to understand how deep the human desire is for moral self-exculpation. Moral self-exculpation. Now, you say, and I didn't say this, you said this, I'm a beneficiary of illicit white privilege. Okay?
Illicit?
Well, isn't all white privilege illicit? Is it deserved?
Well, in this current system, there is legality.
Illicit means immoral.
Okay, then
immoral white privilege.
Yeah.
Okay. So then if I were to say to you, there are surely many deserving minorities who would like to come to Amherst but have the inherited disadvantage of American history. Therefore, since you are an acknowledged beneficiary of illicit privilege, would you be willing to step aside voluntarily, putting your own moral mouth where your self-proclaimed virtue is, and give your seat, not my seat. I realize you may be super generous with other people's advantages and favor affirmative action, so other white kids who apply to Amherst are turned away to open spaces for minorities. But I'm not talking about you acting out your virtue on them. I'm talking about you acting out your virtue on you. Mm-hmm. Are you willing to give up your illicit seat that you don't deserve here at Amherst to make room for a disadvantaged minority? Yes or no?
Okay, well, let me start here. I don't know how you got on the topic of affirmative action.
By following the logic of your...
No, I never said specifically that I think that race-based affirmative action is the best way to rectify the systems of injustice that...
Why don't you practice it by stepping out? And why don't you go to the registrar tomorrow and tell him you want to withdraw from Amherst?
Are you listening to what he just said to you? Get on.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
Think about it.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I mean, look, I'm only continuing to engage because you continue to engage with me, and I do want to hear other people's questions. But in response to that, again, what you're trying to demonstrate is that everyone's hypocritical. As someone once said, that we're all dirty up to our arms, right? We're not all perfect. None of us is perfectly morally consistent. Now, I've said absolutely nothing about affirmative action. The fact is that I believe everyone in this room is hypocritical to some degree. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't strive for a more just and equitable system entirely.
It all boils back down to reparations.
True liberation starts with money.
Everybody would be guilty. Everybody owes somebody something. Why not just start at ground zero and try to move forward and use history as a learning device instead of going back in history? We're not in a DeLorean. This isn't a time machine. We don't need to go back in time. We need to progress. Isn't that what the party of progression is all about? Moving forward? Unfortunately, we have moved backwards in time, and someone messed up the flux capacitor.
Great Scott!
And now we're in some sort of timeline paradox that we just can't seem to get out of. Again, I'm Steve Inman. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, make sure to subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell. Until next time, we'll see you then.